great. So we are in the middle of the 3-part unit called Life Cycles. The first one last week was about beginning of life, and that was all the different events that we generally do around a baby's birth. And went through that. You have the source sheet. I assume everybody has it, so you can always look at the list. And then after the 3, remember the last thing that we mentioned was the 3rd year. Excuse me, when a baby boy is 3, and remember we said this is a custom, so not everybody does it. But it's the last, I would say, something that you should know about is when the upsharon, which is when you shear his locks at age 3. And again, not everybody does it. My husband did it with his boys. I did not do it with my son. I think my brothers had it. I know my sister does it. She's very right-wing and in the very more right-wing community. And in fact, she has these pictures on the wall of her sons. She has 4, 5 sons, and all of them have gorgeous hair. So she took pictures of them before cutting. They're beautiful. And then they get very shorn, of course. And they're all up on the wall in order. And it's kind of beautiful when they're 3, each of them when they're 3. The next important stopping point in Orthodoxy, I do not know if there are other stopping points in other denominations, but I'm talking about in Orthodoxy, would be when the child becomes a bar or bat mitzvah. Now, I want to explain that this is talking about gender, right? Until a few years ago, there was only bar or bat mitzvah. I mean, we didn't have, I'm not saying people didn't feel issues with gender, but it wasn't out in the open. So we either had a bar mitzvah or we had a bat mitzvah. There were no other options. By the way, sometimes called a bas mitzvah. Remember, we said there's like Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom. So that's the American way of doing it and the Israeli way of doing it. I use the Israeli inflection, but you should know, people say, oh, she's having a bas mitzvah. So bat mitzvah, bas mitzvah is exactly the same. And what does it actually mean? What it means, bar is actually the Aramaic. Did we talk about Aramaic? Does everybody here know what Aramaic is? Tell me if you do not, please raise your hand or I will not know that. There you go. Excellent. Okay, I love that. So you know what the Gemara is, the Talmud? We have spoken about it, but I don't think we learned about it this year. You don't know, Jeff, what the Talmud is? Oh, Atoya doesn't know. Okay. So, well, I think we didn't do this year the important book I think that was last year, so we'll get back around to it next year. The important book, though, there's the Bible, the Torah, and then there's when that is closed, and that's after they come into Israel and there are kings and all that. And then towards the end of when the Second Temple period, you heard about the 2 temples, yeah? That we're good? Yes, that's why you give me a thumbs up if you, okay. The discussion between the sages, which was always called the oral Torah, meaning was passed down orally like stories, was actually put into a book. And that book is called the Mishnah or Mishnah, same thing. And that's, let's say it's this big, just theoretically, because it's very terse and succinct and doesn't have a lot of commentary. So, and this was after the Second Temple was destroyed, that they decided to lock it into a book, to put it down so that people won't forget these important discussions, because these were about Jewish law and about all sorts of instances. And then over the next few hundred years, the Talmud is putting down the discourse between the discourse of the sages on the Mishnah. Remember, the Mishnah is this big. The Talmud, look here a second, is like this big. Because on each piece of Mishnah, if it's so terse and it says, if somebody finds money, well, then the Talmud, which is the Hebrew word, and Gemara is the Aramaic word, which I'm about to explain, will say, for example, oh, it means this kind of money, and it means on Shabbat, and it means if you're walking in a field, and then somebody else says, no, it doesn't mean walking in a field, it means if you're walking in the city. And so then they have discussions, because remember, the Mishnah is very tight, and it doesn't explain everything. Probably, you know how when you say something that you think your audience understands, so you don't go into a lot of detail, and then when you need to explain, then you need to explain it. So that's kind of what it was like. So, so in the Talmud, in the Mishnah is written in Hebrew, which was the language spoken in Israel. That was the language of the sages, at least. I don't know if they spoke, I think they spoke Aramaic also. Aramaic is the common language of the people. And what's interesting is that it's very close to Hebrew. It uses Hebrew letters, but and some of the words are very, very, very similar, but there's a difference between it. And it is the language. If the Mishnah, as we said, let's put it over here, was written in Hebrew, the Talmud, the discourse of the Gemara or the Talmud is written in Aramaic. So whenever they quote the Mishnah, they always write Hebrew because that's what the Mishnah was written in. But when they have a discussion, they write it in Aramaic because that was their language, the spoken language at the time. What's so interesting is that somebody told me that he was on reserve in Israel, in Lebanon, before they went on to Lebanon. And he ended up in a town in Lebanon where people spoke Aramaic. And he said he never learned it as a living language. He only learned it as what's written. It's kind of like finding, a town that speaks Latin when you only learned it as, in a book or studying it. But when all of a sudden you find people who are speaking it as everyday language. That is Aramaic. I mean, that's enough for you right now to know. When we get back to talking about the books, then I can explain to you more. How did we start? Oh, bar. So the word bar is in Aramaic, which, as I said, is very close to Hebrew. And bar is really ben. Ben in Hebrew is a boy or a son. So, but it can also mean a masculine ownership of something, meaning this is a boy who now is, and let's find a second word, hyphenate and connect to it. So this boy now, bar mitzvah, now he owns or he is eligible for and responsible for doing mitzvot or mitzvot, because he has moved now at this age from being a child to being basically an adult. There's no real intermediate stage in Judaism. Does that make sense? Just trying to explain what the words mean. Okay. So who knows the age? Not that I'm hiding this, it's not a trick question. It was in a source sheet. But what's the age that a boy becomes bar mitzvah? You guys can unmute. You do know that, right? Unless you're making a lot of noise. Yeah, Chelsea.
13 for boys and 12 for girls.
Right. So first of all, Jamie, I saw you unmute. Who has an idea of why girls are 12 and boys are 13? Any thoughts about that?
Is it biological?
I think, Gabby, it is partly biological. I think it's partly biological. Yeah, very good. And because girls tend to mature. Yeah, Jamie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and because girls tend to mature a little faster than boys.
Yeah, they really do. We know that. And it makes sense. It's true that a girl also starts puberty around, not everybody. Some do it 11 and a half, some at 12, some 13, 14. But in general, what do you actually need? Let me ask this group. And I really would love you to weigh in, except for Gabby, who's not able to talk. But for those who can, what do you need to move from being a child to being an adult who's responsible in Judaism? What do you think? Your thoughts? It's not written anywhere. This is something I want to discuss. I want to have a discussion about it.
I always thought it was kind of to do with like the preparation of your bar mitzvah, like the actual work that goes into it that kind of makes you an adult, the learning and stuff like that.
I love that idea. That's great. 1 second, let's hold that thought. Latoya, yeah.
Oh no, I was saying that I was leaning towards that as well, thinking that it's more of the ritual, the bar mitzvah, the bat mitzvah. That's probably what's needed to establish a child from someone who's more responsible in Judaism.
In other words, what I'm hearing from what you're saying, both of you, beautiful, is that a younger child wouldn't be able to even prepare or think of embarking on a journey to prepare. Tell me if I'm saying it right, to become a bar or bat mitzvah when they're like 8 or 9. They're just not ready to embark on something serious. So I just have to differentiate, because you're talking about celebrating. I think what you're saying is the celebration, but guess what? Which I wrote in the sheet. You become a bar or bat mitzvah if you do zilch. You do nothing. You wake up on your 13th, or actually it starts at night, let's be honest, because remember what we said, Jewish days start
At night.
at night, like Shabbat. You can always remember that. It's always like Shabbat. So the day somebody is born, let's say Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the first Adar. This year we have a leap year, we have an extra month. So is Thursday night. If somebody became 13 on Rosh Chodesh Adar, Aleph, on the first Adar, Thursday night, he has to do 0 and bing, he's a bar mitzvah and he is obligated in mitzvot. So I'm not saying you're wrong, Latoya and Gabby, but technically you need to do 0. A girl, if she becomes 12 tonight, that's it. She does nothing. Now, I think what you're saying, so I just want to separate between preparing for celebrating it or marking it in some way and becoming a bar, you know, bat mitzvah. People say to me, I never had a bat mitzvah. What they really mean to say is not that they didn't have one, unless they converted, they had one when they turned 12. You know, women say to me, I never had a bat mitzvah. What they mean is, I never celebrated or marked it in a meaningful way. That doesn't mean you didn't have a bat mitzvah. Sometimes people say, but I didn't have one, I'm not a full Jew. That's not true. You do not need to mark it or do anything special. Does that mean you shouldn't do it? No, of course you should, but you don't need it. And I just want you to know that, because that's knowledge that you need. You just want to have that knowledge that if somebody ever says that to you, you know, so that you'll, oh, but did you have a bat mitzvah? I don't know if you're discussing conversion or not. You don't have to discuss that you converted. Remember that. You don't ever have to do that. That's all up to you. But, you know, you could say, never do that. I'm actually trying to think of a way to maybe celebrate it as an adult. That's all. By the way, I also did not mark it, my bat mitzvah, when I was 12, because it just wasn't accepted. Maybe my parents made a kiddush. I'm not sure if they even did that. I don't know. I don't remember. I have to ask them. I do not remember it being marked, but I certainly 100% did nothing ritual. I did nothing Jewish. I didn't even prepare a Devar Torah, piece of Torah, to mark it. But I want to go back to Gabby. Let's tell you a big, yeah, Chelsea, go on.
Is that because it just wasn't marked for like bar or bat mitzvahs at the
No,
time, or
no,
was it just
girls.
more common?
No, only girls. No. My 3 brothers had it. No, yeah, no, they 100%. And again, we're talking about the Orthodox world. I don't really know about the other denominations when they did. By the way, there's some denominations that have girls do it at 13. I don't know where that comes from. They have nothing halachic to base it on. It is based on whatever reason that it's easier for them. You know, it just, I don't know, because they're in the same grade. I don't know why, but there is nothing from our ritual, from our, just so you know, from our tradition that supports that. Although, of course, you can mark your bat or bar mitzvah the rest of your life. You could do it 1 year later. You can do it 25 years later. I think, you know, it doesn't matter, except for yourself. For yourself, it might make a difference. What I wanted to say, what Gabby and Latoya were saying, basically, is that the same way you wouldn't necessarily be ready, to embark on a journey to mark your bat or bar mitzvah in a very meaningful way, pretty much before that age. For a girl, usually at age 11, for a boy at age 12, right? Because you do it from a year before, very, very often. You don't have to, but very often. So the same way you wouldn't be ready, you probably won't be ready until age, for a girl 12 and a boy 13, to take on what we might call the mantle. It's a beautiful word, the mantle of mitzvot. And this is for positive or for, you know, the refraining commandments, what you should do and what you should not do. And that's that is according, and we have sources in the Mishnah, which I had spoken to about, in the Talmud and the Gemara, same thing. Gemara and Talmud is the same thing. Talmud is in Hebrew, Gemara is in Aramaic. The that tell us that it's a boy when he's 13 and a girl when she's 12, which means, this is always what the kids say when I learn with them, oh, I'm going to have to fast on Yom Kippur. And that actually is the source, because that's the most iconic. But it also means you have to keep Shabbat and keep kosher and make a blessing, make a bracha, and fulfill the mitzvah, any mitzvah. For a boy, they're obligatory. Some of them are obligatory for women. You know, if I get a lulav and a throat for myself, and men often get it for their sons, or families get it for their sons who are 13, I would get one for a girl who's 12 as well. to have a, the shaking the lulav in its robe, or to light a Chanukiah on Chanukah, or any of the other myriad of mitzvot that appear. Are we
I have a question.
great? I love it. 1 second, Jeff. First Chelsea, then Jeff.
So is it,
Healthy.
my question is, so when the boy or girl has their bat mitzvah, they're responsible for like all of the mitzvot
I wouldn't say when they
after that?
have it. I would say when they become. That would
When
be a
they
better way to
become.
say. When you
Okay,
have
yes.
one, you're using it in the loose
Right.
way.
I'm like using it as
Everybody
the
uses
celebration.
it.
Yeah.
I have it, meaning it's either the celebration or the weekend or reading from the Torah, which we're going to go into. Yes, go on. So when they
Yeah.
become a bar or bat mitzvah, yeah.
Right. When they become a bar or bat mitzvah, they're responsible for all of the mitzvot. Until then, is it their parents that are like responsible for
Pretty
them,
much.
basically?
Basically, yeah. Good call. Really good call. So yeah, the parents as if get the merit if they do it. And I mean, I don't know if it's counted in God's eyes. It's a little hard to know. We consider everything up until bar bat mitzvah to be chinuch, which is education or educational. So it all goes into some kit, some toolkit by God, that fills up the educational satchel. Yeah, go Jeff. Yeah, I hear you.
The interesting thing, though, even though all these mitzvot are not obligated upon children until they're bar bat mitzvah, I see they're very steeped in praying and saying Shema, and they become expert at it.
Why do
Even
you think?
though
Yeah. Why do you think
it's-
that is?
I see them at synagogue. I see little 7-year-old kids saying this stuff like experts, 10-year-old kids.
Right. So why? So why do you think that's true?
Well, I
Like,
know,
what's the point of it?
I guess because it's very detail oriented, and I guess prayer is that important.
You mean specifically prayer, but you don't know what they do outside of the show.
Thank
I
God.
assume they do
Yeah.
other things as well.
Yeah, like play sports. Yeah.
They play sports. Yeah. That's not such a Jewish thing.
Well,
There's no commandment in the Torah specifically to play sports, although you should keep your body healthy. I can't say that is right. But who's going to probably grow up to be a great baseball player is possibly somebody who started at a young age and is really good at it because they practiced a lot. So if you don't teach them before bar bat mitzvah, first of all, they won't want to do it because they're teenagers. They may still not want to do it because they're teenagers. But if this is something that they've done and they've been brought up, this is the way we do things. We thank God. We pray to God. This is how we do it. Then at the very least, they have the tools to make the decision. So what was your question? Was it a comment, an observation, or was it a question?
Maybe it's all of the above. It's the idea that so the question, I guess, is they're not obligated to pray, but they're being encouraged to pray so that it's under their belt by the time they're bar mitzvah.
I mean, they're obligated in a sense educationally. Yeah, I mean, think about it. It's really hard to say, okay, from tomorrow, you're going to do everything completely differently. You're going to start saying blessings, brachot on food. You're going to start coming to shul. You're going to start. How can they do that? I mean, you can see yourselves, those who are learning. It's hard. You're going through that process. So you're adults. Maybe you can do it a little faster. Maybe not, by the way. Children sometimes learn faster. But it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to get used to. And if you don't, I mean, you can start later in life, but why wouldn't we start earlier in life? You're not going to say to kids, you're 13, from tomorrow, you're going to start doing. Now, there are things, boys, particularly in the Orthodox community, although there are girls that do it as well. People, have we spoken about tefillin that you wrap on the arm? Spoke about that, the leather on the arm. So that's generally not, I would say the vast majority is boys. There are some girls who do it.
I have a
It's
question.
unusual. Yeah, just 1 second. Let me just finish the thought and then please. No, it's fine. So we don't give it to, first of all, it's kind of a marking a rite of passage for the boy to start at age 13, but also because maybe they won't be so careful with it. They won't be so clean with it. It's, you're not allowed to go to the bathroom with it. You have to take it off and put it on. It's a big undertaking, responsibility. So we start that a month before, and I'm not sure if they say a blessing on it before they're actually bar mitzvah. And then by the time they're bar mitzvah, they've been doing it every day except for Shabbat. they know how to do it, right? It's easier for them to do it. Yes, what's your question, Chelsea?
Oh, my question was, so they're not obligated to do the mitzvot until they are bar or bat mitzvah. But did the 10 Commandments supersede that, or is that included in
Well,
that sphere?
let's go with the left side. Don't murder. I think you probably shouldn't murder under 13. And I'm not trying to be facetious. Do not steal. You certainly want to teach your children not to steal, not to bear false witness, not to covet. So all the don'ts. I mean, you should teach your kids that. Will they have a punishment if they do that? That's not clear if that kind of, the scale is going to be on the parents. That might be. But so the 10 Commandments, I just read something that said that all of the mitzvot in the Torah can be fit into one of the 10 Commandments, which I thought was really cool. I don't know how to do that personally, but I thought that was a cool idea. So the first one is, I am the Lord your God, and you have to believe in me, or you should believe in me. I don't know. What would you say? I mean, you can't command a 3-year-old to do that. Can't command a 5-year-old really as they get older. Hopefully they acquire the idea behind it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, because like it does seem like they should supersede, but at the same time, like I think when you're talking about something like do not kill, that's like it feels like such an obviously like extreme one. But when it comes to like do not bear false witness, it's like I think until a certain age, kids like don't really understand the difference
Exactly.
between what
So
they're
there
saying.
would be no kind of punishment. Look, kids steal all the time from each other when they're young. Nobody's punishing them for that. Even God wouldn't punish them for that, but we need to teach them not to do it. Right? We need to teach them that you're not supposed to. And that's our job as parents or as teachers or just as people living in society, that's our responsibility to teach them. So I mean, the answer is kind of twofold. Yes, they should honor their father and their mother, and they should keep Shabbat. But until age 12 and 13, it's still within what we call education. They're just not able, it's kind of not counted in some way. I mean, let's think of it differently. Let's think of it, when you have juveniles, right? So often they're not held accountable until a certain age, even though they might be very accountable, but maybe their sense of right and wrong or sense of whatever is not fully developed. Or maybe, in some ways, children might say to you that they believe in God in the purest, simplest way. And others might be, I don't understand. What is God? What is Hashem? Where is he? What does he do? So let's look at the whole 12 and 13 years as a learning experience. But what we're teaching them is to keep the 10 Commandments or the 10 utterances, to keep the Torah, to live a life with a positivity and value. So I'm not sure how to answer your question, Chelsea. It's a complicated answer because they're kind of commanded, but how do you know when they're able to really be held accountable for it? The definitive time that they're held accountable is 12 and 13. That's the Orthodox Judaism is really, really good at that, at setting definitive times, amounts, ways, we're really good at that. It just makes it easier to live our lives when we have very clear definitions of what is okay and what isn't. Okay, any other questions up until here? Okay, how do we celebrate bar mitzvahs? So that's something that really has changed over time. And any way one celebrates it is okay. Although, I always tell parents who come to me to consult, more with girls than with boys, but when they say to me, oh, we should this and maybe not a party, I said, of course you should have a party if that's what she wants. And if you can afford it, or make a simpler party, because it's a time of celebration and you're messaging your child. Like, I don't denounce, because I'm a rabbi, I don't denounce the fact that there's a celebration. I think that's a good thing. I mean, when one gets married, there's the actual under the canopy and doing all that. But why do we have a meal with dancing afterwards? Because we're communally rejoicing. There's a reason for it. So a bar, and did you want to say something, Martin? Yes, excuse me one moment. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
The only reason
In shul? What's up to with shul?
He says there's no reason to have a covering up and all the other.
Okay,
He says it's all that.
okay. I don't want to say that because it's not exactly, I don't exactly know what he means. He says that his rabbi in his shul said that it's all about the party and not about anything else. I don't know if I agree with that.
Well,
I think that it's important to have the celebration and also for the child to mark in some meaningful way that this is not just a party where we're happy, but that there's a reason that we're marking it at age 12 or 13. Otherwise, it's just a party. Not just a party. It's an important party. But this is a way for him or her to mark the fact that he or she or they, say that nowadays, has become an adult in Judaism. Now that can be anything from, learning about blessings or about my daughter learns about her name. It was very meaningful to her. What did her name mean? And it happened to be, it was Maria, and it connected back to Mount Moriah. And we went on a tour and then we prepared a PowerPoint and she spoke about Mount Moriah over the generations. It was really cute. We did a time elevator. I didn't actually do that part of it, but the people in my family who are more creative, I took care of all the food. But she explained to her friends and she learned about her name. It was very meaningful to her. She didn't read in the Torah, which would be another option, but she did something to mark the fact that she became an adult. And that's the part that I think is important. Doesn't detract from the party part at all. I would say traditionally in Orthodoxy, boys have read from the Torah. Now, there are some places most places, there's pressure for them to read the whole parasha, the whole Torah portion. It's a lot. I don't believe in that. I don't think anybody should feel pressured about that because some kids just can't handle it. And I'm happy that nowadays, sometimes they don't. I had a student who did not, the longest aliyah, there was one portion, it's always divided into 7. The very, very long one, his father did. And that was great. He did 1, 2, 3, the father did 4, he did 5, 6, 7, and everybody was happier. It just wasn't going to happen with him. But nobody should judge them because of that. There's always this rite of passage and it doesn't always work for everybody. Sometimes they lead services, not as common. In the more right-wing Orthodox community, they actually don't have them read the whole parsha because they don't want to put them under pressure. And then what they do is they often sit and learn a huge amount of Mishnah, or a huge amount of Gemara, Talmud, and then they do what's called the siyum, which literally means to finish. And it's a big thing in Orthodoxy, at least, to finish a certain amount of something, whatever that is, and to make a party surrounding it. But you always teach them Torah when you do that. So sometimes a child might do that. Girls traditionally did more things like what we call a chesed project. Chesed means kindness. So it's doing some, it could be making teddy bears and giving them or anything, doing art projects and then donating or doing something. But I would say today and in the last maybe 20, 30 years, I don't know how many, because girls now have platforms, they have places where they could do more formalistic ritual things. Often they choose to do that. So when can they do that? They can do that in a women's tefillah group. Now, people familiar with that here? What a women's tefillah group is? Anybody? Raise your hand if you don't. Yes, Jamie, no? No. And Latoya. And does anybody here know what a partnership minyan is? No. Okay, so good. These are really good terms for me to explain to you. Actually, this Shabbat, we're having a women's tefillah in the shul, and the girl will be reading for her bat mitzvah the whole parasha, which is beautiful. So let me explain. There's the traditional minyan, that's 10 men, and all the parts of the davening of the tefillah can be said. There's repetition, there's something called kaddish, kedusha, there are all sorts of pieces you can only do when you have 10 men. And remember, what is 10 men? Anybody age 13 and over who's a man, a boy, male, okay? Right? Women cannot be part of a minyan in the sense of being counted for the 10, but don't forget, usually you have way more than 10. 11 doesn't add to the 10, 12 doesn't add to the 10, but we still want more men in the shul, just like we want women in the shul. I always say that the first woman and the 11th man are exactly the same, meaning they're pleasing in the eyes of God. Okay. Women's tefillah is something that came up in the 70s, and it's not a minyan, which is why I don't like it when in Orthodoxy, well, it's only relevant in Orthodoxy, when people say a women's minyan or women's minyan. Why? because a minyan is actually a halachic term that means 10 men. So there is no such thing as women's minyan per se, but there are women's tefillah groups, and it's become more or less popular in different settings. There are differences because women can lead tefillah, they can read from the Torah. There's nothing wrong. Women are allowed to hold the Torah. They're allowed to read from the Torah. Even if some people tell you can't, that's not true halachically, only true traditionally. And they can do many, many parts, and there are some parts they can't do. But in a women's tefillah group, the women do everything. They lead the services, they read from the Torah, they lift it, they take it out, they do all those pieces. So in that kind of setting, a girl could learn her parasha and she could read. Okay, everybody with me on that? In HR, we do something very special. This started maybe 4 years ago. It's done also in Israel and maybe in a few other shows. Unusual, but we're a little more unusual in HR because we're more culturally aware and we try to make space for women as much as possible. We say, well, when a boy has a bar mitzvah and is reading, then he's center stage in the main sanctuary. So we want to offer a girl. She shouldn't feel like she's relegated to the down below to the small space. She should also feel center stage. So what we do is we offer a traditional minyan downstairs, and she leads, or somebody from her family leads, a women's tefillah in the main sanctuary. Men are invited, but they are not counted towards the minyan. So we do not consider it a halachic minyan. They're sitting on the side, they daven or not, we don't know, we don't care. And the women do everything until a certain point. And the people downstairs who came for the traditional one, we started a little bit earlier so that they can come upstairs and still hear the girl read part of the parasha. And that way they get to take part and listen to, they've already read the Torah downstairs, but they come up and they can hear the girl read, and that feels very, very, very special. And then at the end of the Torah reading, we move into a regular minyan, back to regular, and everybody's joining in the traditional minyan. Those who don't wish to partake in that, just stay downstairs and finish davening and go home. People with me? Yes, Latoya.
Okay, so basically, a bat mitzvah and a bar mitzvah are a little different in the sense that a bar mitzvah, the gentleman, the boy, the man, he reads in front of the center stage audience.
He can,
He
just like
can.
the men do. Basically, he does everything the men do. He's just younger. For a
Right.
girl, you have to be more creative if she wants to do similar things.
Oh, okay.
That's
That's
correct.
interesting.
And not every girl wants to do that. Many girls are like, I'm good. I'll learn something with my mother or father or teacher and I'll teach about it. Or I'll, do a special project, or I don't know, whatever it is that they decide. Nobody
So is there
forces you-
anything,
Go ahead.
Halak, for the girl? I know for the boys, they have to do, like, read a portion of the Torah, the seven
They
portions.
don't have to. It's just become
Mhm.
culturally accepted.
Got it. Okay.
If they don't do
Got
it, nothing happens.
Got
But
it.
they often will at least have an aliyah, like they'll come up, they'll say the blessing, so that's marking it. In Israel, it's very common for secular boys who don't have a background in coming to shul and all that to read the very last part on Shabbat. It's called Maftir, it's very short. And then what's called the Haftorah. Now, don't forget, in Israel, they read Hebrew, so it makes it a little bit easier for them. I mean, here they also read Hebrew, but not quite as fluently. And so that's often done in an Orthodox shul where they'll read that part, which is very sweet as well. So, but there's nobody has to do anything. That is what has become the culturally accepted way to market. The same way that, weddings, it's culturally accepted to have a band and to have flowers and to have, that kind of thing. Although this is a little bit different because this is how do you market. So girls, I would say in the last 30 years, let's say, or so, have wanted to do more very often. Not everybody, some. And often it makes people, others like, what are you doing? That feels weird. That feels awkward. But it's become, in certain circles, certainly in our circles, like in HIR and those kind of shows. Now I want to explain to you what a partnership minyan is.
Yeah.
A partnership minyan, we have one in Riverdale. It's not very active now, but it has been in the past, is in Israel in many places, in America in many places, in Australia, in England. It's a traditional minyan with a mechitza, right? The barrier between men and women. You still need 10 men to be counted. Everything is the same, except based on certain halachic sources, women can read from the Torah and they can do certain parts that are not, you don't need a minyan for. Now, I'm not going to tell you what all those pieces are. This class is not about a partnership minyan. But if a girl chooses to have her bat mitzvah in a partnership minyan, she might do those pieces, which we would create on the second floor or downstairs in the shul, because we don't do it in our shul, in the main shul. That we don't do in the main shul. Then she would read from the Quran. She would do all the pieces that she's allowed to do under a partnership minyan, but that really is a minyan, meaning a quorum with 10 men. So it just depends on what she wants and how they figure it out. And those are some of the options that we offer for bat mitzvah. Another option is mincha, because on Shabbat you read a short portion on Shabbat. I didn't even write that. I should put that into the file. So that feels easier. And then you could do that in a women's tefillah or in a partnership. And then you could do many, many other things. You could basically do whatever you want as long as it's within Jewish law. Are we clear on bat mitzvah more or less? And a party. Love the party. All right. Are we good? Do we feel comfortable more or less? Now, a bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah celebration will be similar, different, depending on, the family, how much money they have, how many friends they have, how much family they have. I know a family now that just went away to a hotel because they couldn't put people up here in Riverdale for Shabbat. So they borrowed a Sefer Torah from the shul and they went to some setting, some hotel of some kind, I don't know, and the boy read from them. They just created their own Shabbat. And that also can happen. And that's more or less, okay, terrific. Now we're going to move to the next life cycle event in Orthodox age. Again, I don't know about other denominations, and that would be engagement and wedding. Now, engagement, I think I'm going to open up the source sheet on that one.
I have a question. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
So I know you just said a while ago that they made their own Shabbat. So basically, bar mitzvah has to be done during Shabbat. Okay.
Could be done on a Rosh Chodesh.
Okay.
That's a beautiful, in fact, I'm doing one on a Rosh Chodesh with a girl next month. It's usually done on Shabbat.
Usually.
Because if the boy reads or girl reads the whole parasha, that only happens on Shabbat. And that's like the highest level. That's, where often people aim for. But that's a great question. Could do it on a Monday or Thursday they could read, or they could not read from the Torah and just do whatever. They could do, my friend's father did a hike in Israel. It was very meaningful. We went to a place in one of them called Mini Israel, which has a lot of Israel sites. I actually created for her a scavenger hunt, and the girls were divided into teams and they had to find different things and come back. And the girls said after we had a meal, was only with her girlfriends. Maybe the family had a separate event. And she taught something that she learned, or she led it, I think. She explained it. That's also meaningful because it was about Israel, it was about her heritage, her tradition. She included stories from her background. It can be whatever you want. But if you want to read the whole Parsha Latoya, it has to be on Shabbat. That would be a better way to say it, because there is no whole Parsha in the middle of the week. All right? Is that clear? Yeah, we good? Latoya, we good? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, the next thing would be engagement. Now, engagement today doesn't really have halachic ramifications in the modern Orthodox so much. It used to be that people were betrothed, couples were betrothed, and then they waited a year, and they actually were betrothed halachically to the extent that if for some reason they actually have to get divorced, or form of divorce, like they were actually like as if half married already. We don't do that anymore because it creates so many problems, or could create, or lo aleinu, God forbid, if one of them dies, the other one's a widow. I mean, why do that? So what we do today is those who have the traditional halachic engagement, it's done only at the wedding itself, like a little ceremony, and then before you even get married, okay? But everybody following that, but we still have engagement parties. So I just want to tell you like what they might be called. That's the moment. This is one of my favorite source sheets. I had so much fun creating it. Just saying. Okay. Nope, that didn't work. Let's try that again. Just a minute. Okay, now it'll work. Okay. All right, there's so many things to talk about with weddings and engagements. But first we said we're going to start with the engagement part. Okay, so there's something, again, this is in different, like in, again, my sister's community, which is more right wing, they will have something called a vort. A vort means a word in Yiddish. I'm not sure what it means, if there's any binding on that halachically. I can't answer that, but usually there's a very short engagement period in these circles. So I'm not sure what the vort, if it's binding, but just so you know, if somebody says I'm going to a vort, it means a word, but it's come to mean this kind of engagement. Or l'chaim. What's l'chaim? Raising a toast, l'chaim, right? I mean, Chelsea and Alon are going to have an engagement party, and people will raise l'chaim, and we'll be happy, and we'll be excited. And I don't know. Sometimes people break a plate, the mothers, but not
At
that
Alon's
common.
brother's
Yeah,
wedding, they did it right before the wedding. the plate
exactly.
breaking.
That's what and that's what I was talking about, that you put it right next to it. Break a plate at the wedding, and then just a few minutes later under the chuppah, that's when you would break the glass. That would be a different thing. Okay, so this is a celebration of a couple's engagement. It used to be, as I said, an official part of the marriage ceremony, often a year before the actual marriage, just so that you know what these things are. Now, erusin is sometimes called tanaim, which means conditions. So in here in Israel, you might say a mesibat erusin, meaning an engagement party, which would be the same thing as I said here, the l'chaim or the vort, the l'chaim really. But usually today, as Chelsea said, it's done at the wedding. Very often in Orthodox weddings, most Orthodox weddings, not all, but most, the bride and the groom are in separate rooms because there's a strong custom not to see each other for the day before, the day of, or sometimes the week before the wedding. Although today, because of pictures, very often people, it just takes too much time after the chuppah, after getting married, an hour for pictures and people are waiting. So very often people do see each other before, but there still is at least an hour or so where the bride receives her guests and the groom receives his guests, and slightly different areas, usually physical areas. And the moms, the mom of the bride, the mom of the groom, come, and together they break a plate. Now in Israel, at least, it's often a decorated plate, gorgeously decorated by one of the bride's friends, and then it's broken. And it's funny because the reason we break things is to remember that there's brokenness in the world, and that's still a good thing to remember, and that's a beautiful thing to include. But it's kind of funny that it signifies mazal tov, right? But it's also okay because there are other ways to signify mazal tov, congratulations. And this is beautiful that we do that, as long as you take a moment to say something about it first. Everybody okay with this till now?
I have a question about
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
So my mom isn't Jewish. Would she still do this?
So I don't know. That's actually a really, really good question. I'm not sure because if it has no halachic significance, then there's no issue with her doing it. So let's put that down as a question mark and we will find an answer for you because it's also so important for your family not to feel left out. So we want to make sure that we'll be thoughtfully crafting things so that they will not feel left out. So we will make sure to do things. And so, but we have a little bit of time. But yes, those are great questions. I just don't have an answer for you on that, but it's a really good question. Things that, again, this doesn't really have a halachic significance, and yet it might still. So we're going to see. Okay. The real thing is that sometimes there's a contract that's written for the Tanaim, for this engagement part. And that would have to be signed only by, two Jewish males who are not related to you, not related to each other, fully observant. Okay. As I said before, the chatan or chasan's tish in Yiddish means a table. That's just the word that's become used. And the kala, the bride, might have a tish. More often it's the reception. She's sitting in a bridal chair or in a bench, and the moms are there, the siblings maybe, grandmothers, whoever is, generally the women sit there, because in Orthodoxy we do have separation. We don't generally dance together holding hands, or generally Orthodox people, so there's still this separation. And everybody, by the way, just so you know, there is the highest level of joy, simcha, in Judaism is a wedding. That is the iconic definition of what it means. And there is a special mitzvah commandment, the sameach chatan v'kala, to bring joy to the bride and groom, which is why there's dancing, which is why people do silly things, which is why people put bottles on their heads, which is why people do cartwheels or put funny t-shirts or masks or write cute poems or dances, because you want to do everything that you can to make sure that the bride and the groom are very, very, very happy in a very special way on their wedding day or night, whenever it is. Okay, now by the chatan's tish or table. So as I said, there's often this engagement part, and there's drinking usually. Not my thing, but I know people like it. And there's toasts, more or less formal. There's usually refreshments, although usually reception has better refreshments, so whatever. And there's singing, like Siman Tov or Maz Tov, or there are special songs actually that people sing that all say bride and groom, chatan and kala somewhere inside. And it's a good thing for you guys to make a playlist, Chelsea and Alon, way before, so you'll get used to the songs that you pick. And then somebody might give a little Dvar Torah blessing. That's what happens by the guys. It's beautiful, kind of pre-chuppah. Chuppah is the canopy. Pre-chuppah tension in a very positive and beautiful way. And then, everybody good? You can always ask questions. Now, I just want to tell you that every single wedding should be and is crafted that feels good to the chatan and kala, to the bride and groom, and to the parents, let's say. But there are things that are traditional that are done for everybody, and yet each wedding has slightly different, is done a little bit differently, because of the people who make up the wedding party. But here's a very traditional part. It's called the badekin, which also is from Yiddish. A lot of these, just the terms came to be used, like shul. Shul means synagogue, but in Orthodox, pretty much everybody says shul. It's an Ashkenazic way of saying it. So do you see this picture of the girl? Do you see how she's sitting on like a bench or a chair? I know I made it kind of small. Let's see if I can make it a little bigger. I don't think I can. Oh, yes, I can. Here we go. Okay. So you see this? She's excited. She's happy. Why? Because it's a wedding. But the groom, even if they've seen each other that day, they don't always see each other before. It all depends on that particular wedding. This is when it's starting to happen. So they finished signing. I haven't talked about the ketubah yet. I will. They finished signing that. They finished doing everything. And then you hear music coming, really fast music. That's the most common traditional one. And then the groom is brought in. All the men, sometimes women, are bringing him in with a lot of joyous song. The orchestra or band, whatever it's called, is playing this beautiful, happy music, often with clarinet or saxophone kind of music. Sometimes the groom is brought in on somebody's shoulders. That can happen too. Well, not when he's brought in, maybe when he goes out. And the fathers are walking him down, and beautifully, they stop, and then the groom goes over to his bride, and he covers her in a way of saying, I am choosing you over every other woman in the world. And I think that's a beautiful, sweet, electrically charged moment. You might whisper something to her, probably, like, you're so beautiful, or I can't wait to marry you, or whatever it is they say. And she'll say something to him, and then and then the parents and grandparents have an opportunity to give a blessing to the bride and the groom. And then the groom gets danced out, sometimes on somebody's shoulders, but for sure danced out with a lot of joy and music, because the groom traditionally is the first one to appear he's the first one who comes underneath the chuppah, underneath the canopy. Everybody good with this so far? Okay. The chuppah, so many options, from the fanciest to the simplest. I mean, it should be nice, but it symbolizes the home. And it actually doesn't have walls, which I love, because it symbolizes that they're going to make the walls. It's open to all sides. Everybody's welcome. The joy is welcome. They're radiating out, radiating in. But as you can see, here are two different examples. This is, more nature, and this is a little more elegant, and they're all fine. They're all beautiful. And everybody picks what's good for them, what's within their budget, and what feels beautiful to them. Sometimes there could be a talit, a talis, the prayer shawl that got handed down from a family member, or say from a Holocaust or something, and that becomes on top, part of the wedding canopy. Everybody does what's meaningful for them. But you do get married under a chuppah. That, yes. Okay. I'm just keeping this big so we can see it. Now, walking around. So the bride is actually walking around. I guess she is. I think that's what it is. She walks around counterclockwise around the groom. Actually, at our wedding, oh, I think maybe I did all the walking around. But I've done weddings where the bride walks 3 times, and then or 4 times, and then the groom walks, which is also beautiful, and that's a more modern way. But what it's doing is it's symbolizing the walls that the bride is making in her new home. So usually that's done under the chuppah, if there's room, hopefully. And it's very beautiful. And very often the moms walk behind the bride carrying her train, because often it's, beautiful and long and gorgeous. But so it's kind of a woman's thing, because in Judaism, actually, we say that ishto kebeto, his wife is like his home, meaning is his home. So these are all very traditional, and this is putting aside, I don't think we have same-sex couples here right now, but that would be, a whole different thing. I'm talking about the traditional man and woman, just saying that. Are we good? Great. Okay. Now, we said there could have been, well, I didn't really put that in, but no, not that part. Right, the Tnaim could be read here. I think that if there was an engagement, it would be done here, that contract. Okay, so now the wedding ceremony is made up of 2 parts. Kiddushin, like Kiddush, making Kiddush, we sanctify Shabbat. Here we're sanctifying the marriage. So Kiddushin is when the groom puts a ring on the bride's index finger, and says a very, very special wording. You are sanctified to me, as according to our law of Moses, Moshe, and Israel. Anybody who wants to do a little differently, like the bride would give the groom a ring, so it's a little more complicated in Orthodoxy. But Rabbi Linzer, who is the head of the YCT Yeshivat Chovevei Yeshiva, where Rabbi Exler learned, and many others who you may know, or the ones from Roshel for sure. And I'm the sister yeshiva. That's where I got my ordination. So he's come up with creative ways to make that happen. So as I said, I sit with each couple and work with them on what would work well for them. And also there's been a lot of movement around, well, we haven't gotten to that yet, actually. Sorry. This is very important, actually. It's the ketubah, from the word katuv, I think, written. It's really a marriage contract, and it's when the groom promises to take care of his wife, and the wife agrees to it. And you can read what it says here. And it was signed already by the groom. It is Tish, and we bring it out here because he actually has to give it to his wife, and that is what seals it and says, I am promising to this, and she accepts it from him. Some people like to make a fancy one. We have the simplest one. It's fine. They both are perfectly fine. That depends on, sometimes somebody has somebody in the family, or I don't know, it's important for them. It is a contract, but it also signifies a commitment to each other. One thing I didn't write in here was the prenup. I should put that in here. I will put that in here. I just haven't. I'll put that. Anybody who graduated pretty much from my yeshiva, I think, and from Chovevei, we make sure that any couple that we marry will sign a prenup. Now, this prenup is not really for them, hopefully. It's for other couples who got to a point in their marriage where they did not get along, and unfortunately, the husband can hold the wife kind of hostage by saying, I won't actually give you the get. The get is the piece of paper that says you're divorced from me until you do X, Y, Z. And this prenup is becoming more and more and more common. In fact, the RCA, the Rabbinical Council of America, I think will not marry people without it either. So the more it's become common, the more people will do it, which is why we ask every single couple to do it, even if not for yourself. Nobody stands under the chuppah thinking they're going to get divorced. Nobody, as far as I know. But we do it to protect everybody else. So we sign a prenup, and I will put that in later in the same source sheet. And that prenup basically, while we're in this beautiful moment, we love each other and we can commit to each other, we promise that if we ever get to that awful place of anger or hurt or pain, if we don't allow the other to get divorced, Jewishly, we agree to sanctions against ourselves. You have to pay a lot of money and other things. And that way we kind of put on ourselves a hold, a lien, so that we won't get to a place where we won't agree to do it. That people following that? So this prenup is not about dividing your assets. It has nothing to do with that. That's your own that's your own issue. This is specifically having to do with the halacha about, and it's women have also refused to receive a get, but that is few and far between. It happens. I met somebody who it happened to. The very, very prevalent one are men who will not give a get to their wives, and that is a whole separate issue, but this is one of the ways to circumvent that. So prenup is signed. It has to be signed before the marriage, actually before the civil marriage. Is that true? Yes, I believe it's before the civil marriage, actually, which I did, for example, a month or two before the wedding because I wanted my husband to get under my insurance, my health insurance. So I did a civil marriage then. So I guess we signed it before. I don't remember. Okay, marriage contract. And so that's the first part was kiddushin. That's sanctification. The second part is nisuin, which means marriage. So what we do to separate the two, often the rabbi who has interviewed and spoken to the chatan and kala and heard what they love about each other and how they found each other and what's so special, we'll talk about that, give words of blessing, and also we read this ketubah out loud. It can be read in Aramaic. It's written in Aramaic, but sometimes in Israel now it's written in Hebrew, and that can be done in it's often just kind of mumbled. Reb Stephen and I do not like to mumble it, so we either do it in song or we do it in some other way that make it more meaningful for people. The next part is nisuin. By the way, all of these pieces all need 2 witnesses. Again, the witnesses have to be Jewish, male, not related to each other, not related to the biologically related to the groom and the bride, and they must be Shabbat observant and kosher and all that. Otherwise, it could be that would invalidate the marriage further on in life. So we try to be very careful about that. So we need 2 witnesses, I think, for the ketubah, which is signed in the chatan's tish. Remember, we need 2 witnesses to watch him put the ring on, and it could be the same, it could be different. Very often you have a lot of friends, but they have to be Shabbat observant, and not like brothers because they can't be related to each other. And then we need 2 more witnesses for after the chuppah, which we'll get to in a minute. So that would be 6 different men. Everybody good about that? Okay. The ring, by the way, which I skipped, it can't be like an engagement ring that has a diamond or something in it. It has to be somewhat simple, no breaks in it, nothing that could lead one to think that it costs more than it does. It has to be very clear that and it has to belong to the groom. He can't just give any old ring. Now, there are people who have very fancy and diamond studded wedding rings. So what they do is they buy for $100, $10, whatever it is, from somebody a ring just for the actual ceremony, and then afterwards sell it back to that person, and then the bride can wear the diamond studded ring. So I'm just saying, just a little note, but there are, in other words, all along the way, there are points of tradition that play a part. Now there are 7 blessings. Just a minute. They're Sheva Brachot or Sheva Brachos. They both mean the same thing. 7 blessings. Now they're handed out to family members. Today at my wedding, women read them because any parts I could give to women, I did. And everybody has to be comfortable with that. But as long as the families are okay with it, it's a really beautiful way. The other thing is they could witness like the prenup signing, so that could be another way to do it, or hold the poles of the chuppah. So there are ways to, 1 second, yes, Martin.
You did that? You decided that they were going to read?
I'm sorry, are we talking about that now? We did it together, I thought.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you decide together. When did I say differently? I said the kala decides? No, you. Okay, sorry. We decided at my wedding, sorry. We decided, I don't remember saying I decided, but if I did, I apologize. We decided that we'll have women read it and be a part of it, but there are ways to include women even in more traditional weddings. That's what I wanted to tell people here. The last thing is the Cheder Yichud, which I didn't put in here, but I will. No, I didn't put in here. So the Cheder Yichud is, this is really the first time, according to Halacha, when the husband and wife are together alone. They must be in a room by themselves with no other door, or the doors have to kind of be blocked or guarded for 8 minutes, and there were 2 witnesses left outside. Theoretically, that's enough time to consummate the marriage. I would say that rarely happens, but that's not the point. The point is that it's a significant marking of the wedding at that moment by going into the Cheder Yichud. And it's an opportunity to say hello to each other. So that's kind of nice when you have a few minutes to do that, literally 8 minutes or a little bit more possibly. And then at the end of the wedding, and then the Sheva Brachot. Oh, I do have it. I have it here. Perfect. Oh, this is Sheva Brachot from the end of the wedding. That's why it confused me. Okay. These are traditional blessings sent under the chuppah, but they're also for the little meals or parties that are done, like at the meal that's done after the chuppah. There's the dancing and the meal, and at the end there's the Sheva Brachos or Sheva Brachot. So they're done under the chuppah. They're also done at the meal, and it's an honor to give it out, again, to men or women. And often they're done in the week, up to 6 of them or something like that. Everybody does as many as they want. Shabbat is often a nice time to do that. And then there's the breaking of the glass. Everybody see that? Now, it doesn't have to be the groom. It's usually the groom, but does not have to be. It could be both of them together. I don't recommend, at least not in the same glass, because one could stomp on the other one's foot. I was at one where 2 of them broke a light bulb or a glass. And again, this is about remembering the brokenness in the world. And we usually sing a song about, I forget the O Jerusalem. Then is the Yichudim, as I wrote here. Panim. Okay, everybody, 1 second. Let me just, I spoke a lot. Are we good? And now the wedding obviously has singing and dancing and meal, all that. Right? That just gives you, I just wanted to give you a flow of what a wedding is about. Now, afterwards, any questions until here? Obviously, people are getting married, would sit with their rabbi. I'm always happy to be that rabbi because I know you. And goes through everything, and then you actually you really craft it so that it feels good to you. So that, the right people are doing each part and the flow feels good, the intros feel good, people get included, explained to. If you're coming from a family of origin that's not Jewish, then it's important to explain things. It's important to give them a heads up ahead of time. And it's important even during the wedding to make sure that people who aren't Jewish, you at least give some explanation so it just doesn't feel like one big whirlwind of, I have no idea what happened there. So that's important to me, to make everybody feel comfortable at a wedding as much as we can. The week after the wedding, as I said, there are often, little parties, which is really, really nice because it sometimes feels like kind of a letdown after the wedding. And so some people have 7 or 6 or 5 or 3 or 2, whatever works for them. And for each of those, we try to have at least one person, usually a man, at least traditionally, who is what's called panim chadashot, which means a new face. Somebody who, for whatever reason, was not invited to the wedding or couldn't make it to the wedding. And then that brings more joy. That's just wanted to explain that particular term to you. All right.
I have I guess a question about the panim hadashot. Like, how do people
Panim
feel about
chadashot with the chet. Yeah.
hadashot? Thank you.
Yeah.
How do people feel about being asked to do this? Like, are
That's
they, insulted
no,
a
it's
little?
not that they're asked. Yeah, well, it's funny you said that because I was thinking somebody who we invited to one of my kids, I think. He's like, "Oh, I guess I was on the B list." But it depends on how you look at it. Like if somebody I'm not so close to, or if I'm can't drive for 2 hours to get whatever, or I'm away that weekend, that's the best. Or if friends make you one, then they invite somebody who they know who don't even know you, and that's fine. So you try to do it in a way. And on Shabbat, which is usually when the family is together, you don't need panim chadashot because we always say that the joy of Shabbat gives you enough. So you have to, I agree, you have to handle it sensitively. You don't, I mean, I guess you would know if it's panim chadashot, but it can be a little sensitive, but it will be people who you're not so close to, but you still would like to celebrate with them, or who just happen to be away. So you get them at the Sheva Brachot, it feels good.
And do they have to be Jewish?
I would say yes, for
Okay.
to be counted for this particular, I believe so. Okay, that's mostly what I have to say about the wedding. I just want to add that, oh wait, let me just say this. I did add something. At Orthodox weddings, men and women often dance separately without holding hands. There's something called a mitzvah tanz, which means a mitzvah dance. It's a traditional dance, bouncing bottles on the head. Not everybody does it. Some people do break dancing, some people do juggling, some people do other things. The mazinka is a traditional dance when the last child gets married. Often the parents use a broom as if the home is being swept clean. I had that when my youngest child got married, and she got married to the last and youngest child in his family. So the 4 of us sat in a little, just so you know what it is, sat in a circle. I mean, for Alon, it's going to be a while. He has a younger sister, but much younger sister. But usually the children start, then the sons or daughters or sibling. So then and then slowly you make the circle wider and wider. But often they give toy brooms or brooms to the parents as if you're sweeping your house clean, and it's really just to say I'm so happy that my children, not because I want to get rid of you, but that I'm so happy that my children have made lives for themselves, which is something that we wish for, that they should have joyous lives. Okay. The last thing to know is about that there is a Jewish ritual, which is a get. And it's the only time that that word is used, I believe, or those 2 letters are used, I think, one after the other. And it's particular divorce papers. The man must give it to the woman. It is very, very structured. I was divorced, my first husband, so I know what that structure is. And I've also been, I mean, I don't do it. A man has to be, again, the witnesses, but I could help and be there as a support for women, especially. So it's very highly structured how it's done. The sad part is that men have used it to hold it over their wives until they'll pay money or custody or something. It's very, 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 very hard. And that's where you get something called an aguna. An aguna is somebody who is chained, literally, and there are actually two terms. One of them is somebody who is chained because, let's say, you can't find her husband, like in the Twin Towers. When they came down, there were people who were not found afterwards. They had no way to determine if that person just skipped town or actually died and was pulverized. And it required a lot of halachic research from a very great scholar who's not alive anymore in Israel, who found ways to release these women, because for a woman to have sexual relations when she's married is one of the highest levels of Torah prohibition. And if she has children from somebody else, that child is called a mamzer, which is in English. Do you know what a mamzer is in English, Martin? Do you know what a mamzer is in English? Bastard, that would be called a bastard. But it has an really hard halachic ramifications. So that would be a person, so that would be an aguna, chained woman, because she's chained to a dead marriage. And there's also misuravot get, which means those who their husbands, it's get refusal. Today, this term aguna is used loosely to cover any situation. And there are certain organizations that try to help women who have that. And you can imagine a man who is controlling or has emotional issues or anything else might do that if they were in a bad place. That's what I told you the prenup is for. That's second set of life cycles, middle from 12, 13 till whenever people get married. Any thoughts, questions?
Do you mind explaining, like on Yom Kippur, the annulment stuff?
Oh, of vows?
Yeah.
Sure. On Yom Kippur, because we're going into New Year, and I guess because we want to come in clean, like a clean slate, like an angel, that's why we don't eat. We try to separate from bodily functions as much as we can. We wear white sometimes. That's a common custom. I'm not sure it's exactly why it's on Yom Kippur, but it's about if I promised, if I vowed to do something, even in just in my head, or if I said the words, I just want to make sure I'm starting with a clean slate. I don't know why it has become such a strong custom. I don't have an answer for that. But because it feels that it's the beginning and it has a special tune, it feels like something that's so intertwined with Yom Kippur. Actually, we do the annulment before Rosh Hashanah, but we do a second one publicly because that's more communal. Actually, the day before Erev Rosh Hashanah, we do that in HR. We do it on Zoom, and we actually do an annulment of those vows privately. These, I think, are more for communal vows, and I think it's supposed to be an equalizer, because we say, with the power of the heavenly court and with the power of the court down here, may we be allowed to pray with all people who are transgressors, meaning all of us. So it's kind of an equalizer. So that's and more than that, I would say pick up a Rabbi Sachs Machzor for Yom Kippur. I bet he has great commentary on that. And he really does. And if you find an answer, we'd be glad to hear it. When I don't know an answer, I like to flip it back to the person. Kind of a convenient way to get the answer, you know. Great. I'm so glad you're bringing in questions and that they don't just sit on us, because I might not get back to Rosh Hashanah and Kippur for a long time. So thank you. Anytime people have questions, you're always welcome. I mean, at the end of class or the beginning of class is better, but you're always welcome to ask questions. The last thing I'll say, which I didn't really put in there, is that in general, we've spoken about family purity. We already had that one. So we really prefer for the kala to be able to have sexual relations with her groom on that night, or it doesn't have to be that night or the next night. We really hope she was able to go to mikveh before. That's often, you know, we try to do it, just figure out the date or figure out if she's taking birth control or something, so that she won't have her period, or she won't, you know. So that feels important. And if a kala has not been able to go to mikveh for whatever reason, becomes a little more complicated. They usually don't go off by themselves to the apartment, because it's just too hard to be sleeping alone in the apartment, just the two of them, and not have sex. So we try to work on that, but it happens occasionally, and hopefully not that often. It's not that often for whatever reason. It most often works out. That's what I got for you guys. I'm looking forward to finishing the unit next Monday night when we will do end of life. And that would be most. Now, I just want to say there are many, many life cycle ceremonies that have come up over time and that, you know, people have created, added, and they have validity and legitimacy and they're important. I'm just talking specifically about the ones that are halachic, that have halacha attached to it, that have Jewish law, or they're, you know, very, very, have some connection to Jewish law somewhere, or strong Jewish tradition or custom. There are many others, and there's Jewish ritual, there's so many different places probably on the internet where you can find that, and you can always check with me. But people have wanted rituals for other things. And in fact, I have a book which has women's prayers, and they're prayers when a girl gets her period for the first time. We don't usually say them, but it could be that somebody would. A prayer when, you know, when a woman gets divorced, to be released, or when somebody recovers from a traumatic incident, or, you know, many different things like that. So those exist as well, and they have validity and they have power, and it usually happens when somebody's gone through something and they're looking for some way to mark it. And that, I think that goes along with what we're doing about life cycles, because it's important for things to be marked. It's a very small minority of people. I'm not saying there's totally no judgment here, but those who don't want it to be marked in any way. And that's okay too, as long as, if they care about the halacha, as long as they just do the halachic part. So, all right. Have a good evening. That is the most common wedding music. Anyway, many more like that.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
Some at like on the high holidays, they sang that song. Is there a particular reason, or something that sounded very, very similar?
A lot of them sound similar.
Oh,
They did sing
okay.
one that actually is borrowed from the high holidays. Mahareh Kohen, da 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 da, I da 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 da. So that actually comes from the high holidays and was borrowed because it's describing the beauty of the high priest's face when he came out alive from the Holy of Holies. And one of the lines is the same as the joy on a bridegroom's face. So it was borrowed and brought into weddings. I mean, I don't know why. Maybe there was a groom in the audience, and so they did it. It's unusual to specifically use, but sometimes it's done for whatever reason. And there's many, and there's new ones, and there's old ones, and you know, you want to use the ones that you are familiar with, hopefully. And then there's dancing, hopefully. All right. And thank you for all the questions. Bye all. Hope to see you next week. Feel better, Gabrielle. Gabby. Feel better. Bye.